You can listen to The Professional Left wherever you get your podcasts, on Netroots Radio, or at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There's a PayPal button at our website, or you can mail us a letter and or contribution at P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791.
This is the podcast for October 1st, 2021. It's not safe for work.
Recorded live from the Cornfield Resistance, where every Republican is still stuck in 1983, bitching about taxes and big government and welfare queens and how liberals are ruining everything. It's The Professional Left with Drip Glass and Blue Gal.
Hi, Drip Glass.
Hey, Blue Gal.
Yeah, the Republicans have been stuck in, I think, 1973 for a long time here in Springfield.
Yeah, they don't change. They just don't
but,
change.
You know, the parking at the airport, though, is free.
Oh,
so,
tell people. We're on a list. We made a list.
Yeah.
Of the 12 greatest airports in the world, and we're number 7 or something like that.
Well, apparently, J.B. Pritzker was today mentioning the Springfield airport as winning an award.
We did.
They won a major award from the state for being a nice airport. So that's nice.
With free parking. Which doesn't surprise anyone because, it flies to all 4 cities, and it flies to Canada and Mexico and Mexico.
So it's international.
International. and it used to have a route to Denver, I believe. I know the guy who used to run the place. And for a while, there were certain executives for United, I think, who wanted to get to and from Denver. So they just, we'll make a route. And those 4 guys don't work there anymore. So that line closed down.
So they canceled that flight. Yeah.
And but Florida's a biggie because a whole bunch of Springfield residents in the 50s, I think, who were construction people here, went down to Florida, built their own little community. And this is where a lot of people from this city go to retire and to vacation. So there's a big traffic to and from Florida from Springfield.
From one little town in Florida, from Springfield back and forth. It's a shuttle. Yep. Yeah.
Well, obviously it's Chicago or St. Louis or Puddle Jumpers. And I did discover I can get where I want to go in the West. I can't get there straight, though. I can't get there direct. I have to take, it's like a 7-hour flight if you go with, well, first you got to go to St. Louis and then you got to go back to O'Hare. Like that's the problem with living outside of a big city.
We're only 90 minutes from the St. Louis airport, which is
there's ample parking. There's ample parking.
Ample parking here. Mm-hmm. But a drive. I mean, we're a 90-minute drive from the St. Louis airport.
We are.
So it's just easier to drive.
Yeah.
Anyway, but let's set all of that aside and talk about the fact that from my standpoint at Crooks and Liars this week, I deserve combat pay, comp time, and on-the-job counseling.
You do.
I had to write this week.
I should tell people, I woke up this morning with you half asleep, poised over me with a pair of scissors. And you were like, I don't know what that's about.
Corey Lewandowski. Yeah. I had to write about, not only did I have to write about Stephanie Grisham's revelations about Donald Trump's colonoscopies and his mushroom penis, I also had to write about Corey Lewandowski and the rumor, the right-wing Republican-sourced rumor that he's having an affair with Kristi Noem. So the Corey and Kristi show. And of course, I had to write about it as if, write allegedly all over this post because it is just a rumor. But somebody has knives out in Florida for both Corey Lewandowski and Kristi Noem. And I think we know.
Yeah, there's there's one big knife in Florida. We know who it belongs to.
Yeah. And so Corey Lewandowski stepped away from the Trump campaign. And in part, there are credible accusations of him getting drunk and harassing the wife of an Idaho mega donor, which is very bad form.
Sexually harassing.
Yeah, sexually harassing. But apparently, according to your favorite New York Times writer, Maggie Haberman, Driftglass.
Oh, I was going to say, I have so many.
This isn't about any of that because what you do when you go to parties and harass women is of no interest to the former so-called president. Apparently, Corey said something to the effect that no one gets the Donald's endorsement unless they go through me. And you're not allowed to do that in Trump world.
You're taking food off of my plate? Are you crazy? Yeah. What are you, out of your mind? Yeah. Okay.
And if the money isn't flowing directly to his plate, then, Mango Mussolini has a way to eject you from his presence. So
gone.
Yeah. And I think that's the Republican primaries are going to be super interesting because I don't think Donald's going to be forthcoming with a lot of campaign donations for people who are not him.
No.
And he apparently has his little tiny hands around the neck of Win Red, which is the for-profit fundraising arm of the RNC. Ronna Romney McDaniel certainly doesn't raise her voice to stand up for the party over the person Trump. Maggie Haberman calls Mr. Trump.
Yeah, well, he is the party, so there's really no. You can't ask the party to stand over itself because he is the party.
So we'll just. I think they're getting everything they deserve in that respect.
I couldn't agree more, and it's honestly couldn't happen to a nicer guy than Corey Lewandowski, who is if
he's a horrible person and he's horrible to women. Yes.
If H.R. Haldeman and Al Capone had a baby, it would have been Corey Lewandowski, who's just a violent thug and of course that violent thug was a valued CNN contributor for a number of years, and then he became a Trump guy. Then he went back to CNN. He was sort of the go-to model for how completely fucked in the head media is. How they will just hire anybody who will drag, the trash heap of the Republican Party along with them as a viewer base. And you can use that back and forth as long as you want, as long as you don't threaten their, dick pill and reverse mortgage industry, which is all they really care about. Mm-hmm. And Corey Lewandowski was just awful from the beginning. And it doesn't surprise me that he's awful up until this is not the twilight of his career. He's still, he's still.
He'll be back. He'll be back on CNN or with Trump or wherever, because he's useful. Yeah.
And thanks to the magic of television, it no longer matters what you did last week.
Right.
It literally doesn't matter what you said or did or how awful you were or how fucking terrible you were, as long as the TV network that you snuggle up with is willing to sort of wrap their arms around you and help you pretend that whatever the horrible thing you did just never happened. Because we're not going to mention it. We're just not going to mention it.
I do want to credit someone, I forget their name, but someone on Twitter did say if Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski had a baby, that would be Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, it's sure. How do we know he isn't their love child?
I don't know. Their love child. I think we've talked enough about Corey Lewandowski for one show.
More than enough. That's it for the year. This is our Corey Lewandowski sign-off show. I really swear to God, I thought I would never have to figure out how to spell that asshole's name ever again.
No, because the reason people tuned into the show Drip Class is to hear your reaction to the massively important announcement from Matthew Dowd.
Oh, yes.
That he is running for lieutenant governor of Texas, which is apparently where the power resides.
Yeah, well, why wouldn't he?
In
the state. As predicted by your humble podcaster, as forecast by your humble blogger, one and the same, Matthew Dowd officially announced that he is running for the office of lieutenant governor of Texas as a Democrat.
All right.
This week.
1 point. He gets 1 point.
For what?
Running as a Democrat and not as an independent.
Yeah. Okay.
He gets 1 point for that.
Well, he used to be a Democrat, and then he was a Republican, and then he was independent. Now he's a Democrat again. Now, I don't know what he was when he was screwing Arnold Schwarzenegger's wife while he was running Schwarzenegger's campaign. I think he was technically still
Was he the official paid campaign manager for Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Yes, he was.
While he was bumping uglies with Maria Shriver?
Yes, he was. Absolutely he was. And no one says a fucking word
terrible.
About it. And you know what? I am not judging anyone's sexual proclivities. Maybe she was terribly unhappy. Maybe he was great for her. I don't know. I really don't know. I do know that nailing the guy you're working for's wife while you're trying to get him elected is just bad form.
It's not a good, nice thing to do. No, like you say, I don't think Arnold is in any way a sainted husband.
No.
Innocent. It's he impregnated the nanny or housekeeper or something at,
No, there are no saints in this story.
No.
This is the many saints of Texas. This is not. But
Lord.
the point being that Matthew Dowd has a history. And
no, he doesn't, because you go on Twitter and it's all gone before 2017.
Yeah, that's the point. That is my entire point. That you can see that he was gearing up for something, for a job in the government or a permanent role in MSNBC. And at this point, he really is the Democrat from MSNBC because he's running for a Democratic nomination in Texas, as if there are no other candidates.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, all of the old Bushy friends of his who have all had their reputations barbered by MSNBC, because that's what MSNBC does. It takes old Bush regime scumbag dead enders and turns them into bright, shiny new pundits. Steve Schmidt thinks it's the best goddamn thing in the world that his dear, dear, dear friend, Matthew Dowd, an honest and decent and good man, is running for lieutenant governor of Texas. And you know what? Here, let me tell you at the outset. If I were a Democrat living in Texas and Matthew Dowd were my only other choice, I would vote for him.
Right.
But I would spend a lot of time before that came to pass telling people why they should absolutely not put Matthew Dowd on the ticket. Because Matthew Dowd is a coward who is afraid of his own past. And he is so afraid of his own past that he will block you on social media if you mention it.
Blocks lots of people.
Lots of people. People who I know for a fact did nothing more than say, hey, didn't you say thus and so blocked? Which my theory is it's going to be press conferences and the debates are going to be lit. Because he's just going to hold a big sign up to any question about anything that happened before 2019 that says blocked. I'm blocking you, Mr. Reporter Man. I'm blocking you, fellow candidate. And just talk about whatever the fuck he wants to talk about.
Yeah.
At his heart, Matthew Dowd is an adequate campaign guy.
What do you think he thinks when he looks in the mirror? Does he think he's a chameleon?
He's a hero. He's a fucking hero. Because how else could he get up in the morning? I am a fucking hero. He is a relentless. He's like Marco Rubio. He spews scripture out all over the internet, and talks about love and forgiveness and he's a hollow. I know he's been through personal tragedy in his life. I know he's lost family members, lost kids, I believe. I have nothing but sympathy for the man who has gone through all those things, but he has no skill in this universe other than bullshitting about politics on television. He doesn't know how to do anything else. That's been his entire life. He opened a shitty little consulting firm with Mark McKinnon, was his partner in Texas. He was with Karl Rove, the architect of George Bush's reelection campaign in 2004. As far as I know, he's never held a public office in his life. So why not shoot for the top or second to top job in Texas? And the answer is because he's got, and I've said this a million times on this podcast, and I know it, he's gotten, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in free publicity, just like Donald Trump did on MSNBC, where he is allowed to go on, say whatever the hell he wants. No one asks him any questions. No one pushes him. Everybody says, man, you make a lot of sense. Wow, what a good thing you're saying. And a lot of what he says is great. The problem is everything he is saying now is in direct contradiction to everything he has said his entire life. And this is a grown-ass man who has completely reversed his public persona like 3 different times. And each time it's like, well, let's just let him pretend. Okay, let's let him do it again. And I swear to you, if it weren't for the fact that it was his friend Nicole Wallace, who is letting him sit on television and beef up his reputation to the point where everyone thinks it would be great if this guy were lieutenant governor of Texas. If it were somebody who would ask him one fucking question, his whole campaign would collapse. Because like every other person in that universe, he does not acknowledge that he ever said or did anything other than what he's saying and doing now.
Okay, but Driftglass, let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Is Matthew Dowd doing anything different from what J.D. Vance is doing on Fox?
Not at all. And he's not doing anything other than what Donald Trump did, which is just go on Morning Joe over and over again from the toilet and yuck it up with them and answer questions. And until he, threatened to out their affair he was having, that Joe was having with Mika Brzezinski, they were all good pals. And then when it turned out he was the monster that we all knew him to be, Joe Scarborough pretended that had never happened. And because Joe Scarborough, I can't say this enough, controls the camera, there are within a month, nobody knew that Joe Scarborough had ever met Donald Trump. Had never even knew the guy. Matthew Dowd was the political director, chief analyst for ABC News for 13 years. For the entire campaign, for the entire 2016 campaign, he shit on Hillary Clinton. He called her corrupt. He and his running buddy, Ron Fournier, everywhere they went, it was both parties suck. Both are terrible. Clinton and Trump are both equally awful. You should vote third party. We need to overthrow the corrupt duopoly. It's the two-party system that is destructive. And anyone who says different is a moron. And if you argue with him on social media, as I did, he will call you stupid. He will call my readers stupid, and then eventually block me, which is certainly his right. And then when it turned out he was completely fucking wrong, suddenly he goes down, he disappears for a little while, shows right back up again on MSNBC as the champion of the scourge of both sides do it punditry everywhere. My God, who the hell are these people think both sides are the same? Both sides are equal. It's so obvious that's bullshit. Republicans are insane. Why are people saying both parties are bad? I'm like, Jesus Christ, man.
Let's not forget the misogyny that underrides that.
Yeah.
And furthermore, the ability to delete your past.
Sure.
Just delete everything you said.
That's why and he started doing that a long time ago because there were quotes in magazines, in online magazines of him saying, look, if you're going to talk about all Donald Trump's sexual proclivities and his harassment, et cetera, you have to talk about emails at the same time. And once that became embarrassing, he just deleted it.
Yeah.
Now, the thing about tweets are, once you embed them in your blog, they're there forever. Plain text versions, it doesn't interpret it back into the original look and feel of the original tweet because Matthew Dowd,
the words are there. Yes.
All the words are there. And Matthew Dowd's past is a fucking train wreck.
Yeah.
And all it requires is one reporter asking him a few questions about, didn't you say Hillary Clinton was as corrupt as Donald Trump? And didn't you say Democrats are terrible? And didn't you say anyone who doesn't vote third party is a moron? And didn't you tell people who told you that was terrible and toxic? Didn't you call them stupid? What do you have to say about that, Matthew Dowd? And he holds up his cardboard sign saying, you're blocked. I'm not answering that question. And he'll storm away because he is a fucking coward. He is a coward. A person who will be honest about their past and say, look, I just screwed up really badly. And this was my one job, by the way. Matthew Dowd has never had any other job but talking about politics.
I was employed doing this.
He was hired for a shitload of money by ABC News to be right about politics, and he never was. And the way he was wrong was not harmless. It was toxic, and it was terrible. And he and people like him were banking on the fact that Hillary Clinton would win, and then they could go on and be badasses.
Beat her up for 4 years.
And say, look, I was as tough on her as anybody. So my credibility is fucking intact. But when she lost, he spent 2 years telling everybody, well, Trump voters are nice people. There's a tiny group of people who are terrible. Let's give them a chance. And then when it turned out that, no, the voters are terrible. They're racist. They're monsters. They're everything.
And Donald Trump is incompetent and a dictator and is horrible.
And when it turned out they were everything the left told you they were, Mr. Professional Political Analyst for ABC News, he just blocked everybody who said different and turned 180 degrees without ever explaining a thing, without ever apologizing, without ever even acknowledging that past even exists. And anyone who does that in the real world gets fired or laughed at. But when you have friends...
I think he should be tossed into the middle of the Women's March this Saturday. That's what I think.
I think he should
And we can do Handmaid's Tale on him. And if you haven't read that chapter...
Yeah. Well...
Now that's me I am not endorsing violence. But poetically, I love to see it, okay? But, in literature, I love to see it.
But the fact of the matter is, he has, because the liberal media felt compelled, MSNBC specifically felt compelled to hire lots and lots and lots of former Bush people.
Yes, they did.
And stuff their shelves with all of his friends. No one will ever push him on this. Ever. Ever. Never. That's why they never push Charlie Sykes. They never push Tom Nichols. They never ask anyone about, well, didn't you say something exactly the opposite of this back when it actually fucking mattered? Mm-hmm. They will not tolerate those people. More or less run the narrative. Because if you are permitted, if you have the power to tell your friends, don't talk about the shitty things I did for the last 13 years on television because it'll fuck up my run for governor, and they do it, then you control the narrative. We gave the narrative away to these people by saying that, well, they're our friends now. They're our allies now. Well, now he's running for lieutenant governor. And that's real power.
Mm-hmm.
And I think someone who spent most of their career being horribly wrong in a toxic way and then lying about it and then arguing with people who told them they were wrong. And then
I think the Democratic Party can do better. Let's put it that way.
They can. But people like that, if you really believe people like that should not be held to account, fine. That's your belief. I think you're completely wrong. I think our entire political system is ruined because we don't hold people like that to account for what they said.
Accountability would be nice, wouldn't it, Driftglass?
But one more thing. What discourages me is when I do go on social media on a different universe, just the hundreds of people saying, I followed Matthew Dowd. He is so wise. He is so good. Just the gushing and gushing and gushing and gushing and gushing of praise. And my God, this guy always tells the truth. God, is there a better truth teller in the world than Matthew Dowd? And when you say, yeah, well, here's the history. Oh, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to know that. And of course, he's raising money. He's got his own.
You're causing me to jump ahead in my notes here, Driftglass.
Please do.
In that, and we're going to talk about Christian cinema, and we're going to talk about those assholes in just a minute. But Tony the Democrat runs Postcards to Voters, the one that I use to support candidates, Democratic candidates.
Mm-hmm.
And he responded to a tweet where someone was saying, we should promise to donate money to Kristen Sinema's primary opponent if she doesn't get right with the Biden plan.
Okay.
And Tony the Democrat pointed out, look, Kristen Sinema's primary is in 2026.
Right. You got a little while to go.
There are Democrats running right now whose election is next fucking month.
Yes.
Who are trying to hold on to the legislature by their fingernails because the Republican Party wants to follow Texas's lead on abortion and take away the rights of Virginia women.
Right.
So their election is in 4 weeks, not 2026.
Focus there.
And it is up to Democrats. I'm talking to our audience who already knows this, but if you have something to give, as Tony the Democrat say, make it count today. And, this promising to primary a recalcitrant person and raise money didn't work in Maine last time.
No.
And so we don't even know if Kristen Sinema is going to run for re-election. She may not. And it's over 4 years away. So that causes me to dovetail into talking about Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me yesterday, because you and I have a rule in our marriage that only one of us can be insane and melting down or crazy at a time.
Right.
And this week we have really tag teamed because one of us will get totally hopeless and the other one will be like, it'll be all right. And
if you've seen Hunt for Red October, I go crazy Ivan at the bottom of the hour. So, and she goes crazy Ivan at the top of the hour. So, but it really is shifting. It's
a seesaw. It's a seesaw.
An hourly seesaw. So
an hourly seesaw because this week has been drama, and if you're like us and you watch it all the time, minute by minute, is the government going to shut down? Turns out it's the Senate this morning. We're recording on Thursday afternoon. The Senate passed a continuing resolution to keep the government funded through December. We'll see what the House does with that.
Yeah. Well,
but and so that drama may be over, but the whole thing over the $3.5 trillion bill and now Manchin is actually putting his cards on the table and saying, here's what I want, and I want needs testing, and I want this and that. And Sinema is just a I don't know. Goof. I don't know what her problem is.
She's a grifter.
Yeah. She likes the attention. And but I wanted to point out, when I have had more sane moments, when I've been meditating and thinking about this and remembering that memory is the liberal superpower. And I think we're forgetting long term, and I'm not speaking as a moderate Democrat here. I'm speaking as a progressive who wants all of these things to happen, and I'd like them to happen yesterday.
And as a history teacher,
we have been waiting 40 years for this.
And as a history teacher and fan of Eleanor Roosevelt,
yes, I am. She's a goddess in my book, but we're forgetting how many people opposed FDR and how many people opposed FDR's New Deal. I believe that we're in the process right now, if we take one step back, of building a Green New Deal coalition. And that coalition is going to be made up of young people, liberals, farmers, I believe, will be brought on board.
Yeah.
Ford Motor Company will be brought on board, believe it or not. They're building, they have found, oh my God, people want electric trucks. This is, I mean, the orders that went out, Rachel Maddow had a thing on this about, they announced, oh yeah, we're going to make a Ford F-150 and we're going to make it electric. And the orders just started pouring in like, oh my God, people want this. And so Ford Motor Company is going to want charging stations for all of these trucks they're building. There's a fleet being built in Normal, Illinois of, I think it's electric car batteries. Am I right about,
I think
our friend up there will let us know. I'm probably getting it all wrong, but there's big industry, massive numbers of jobs moving into central Illinois, Normal, Illinois, to on the electric car front. So we're building this coalition, and I found a statement from journalist Sidney Lubell, who surveyed voters after the 1948 presidential election, when it was, Dewey beats Truman.
Yeah.
And it turns out, no, that's not what happened at all. Harry Truman won. And the reason he won was that to an appreciable part of the electorate, this journalist said, the Democrats have replaced the Republicans as the party of prosperity. And I think that's happening now. As I step back and look at this, the party of the middle class, the party that wants women to have a stable economic environment in which to go to work.
Yeah.
And that means making sure that they have support for caring for their parents as well as their children. And those kind of things are going to, I think Obamacare in large part started that. Once Obamacare started to work for people, and and even though we have huge out-of-pocket costs and there's other problems and, prescription drugs and all these things, Obamacare started a ball rolling that government can get involved and make things better. And a new generation of voters is being reminded of that. And so that doesn't solve some other problems, but it helped me this week to realize that that's what I have to do when I wake up tomorrow morning and chop wood, carry water. Yeah. I'm coalition building. If you've ever heard the story about the bricklayer, who's building a cathedral, he's not building a wall, he's building a cathedral. And keeping your eyes on that. We are building a coalition. And so every step you take, whether it's postcards to voters or going to the Women's March this Saturday, and I hope you'll go, whatever it is that you're doing, part of what you're doing is helping to elevate and make visible to the world that coalition. Do you mind if I go right into how awful Politico is?
I do want to add that the mortar in that wall is the absolute tone deafness of Republicans and people like Joe Manchin.
Yeah.
We have a joke in our house about the moment in Goldfinger where Bond dismisses Dink with man talk.
Yes.
He swats her on the ass. Basically says dismisses her because now we're going to have man talk. And that's what Joe Manchin is telling every woman in America.
He is.
Child care, college for your kids, blah, 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 blah. Who wants that kind of wussy stuff? Roads and bridges, I'm cool with that. But stuff that actually helps women and minorities and your young children that are still, in the cradle who you need child care for and daycare for and your kids as they go to college might need help financially. Fuck all that. I don't give a shit about that. This is man talk we're doing up in Senate up here. We don't give a that shit about that nonsense. That is what.
And we're willing to renege on our own agreement.
Sure.
With the women of the Progressive Caucus.
And we're ably abetted, frankly, by the male-dominated media.
Like Politico.
Which are obsessed with, the numbers are so big. Well, no, they're not. They're half of what we spend on the defense, and we're talking about making a country worth defending.
Yes. Right.
But it's like, oh no, the numbers are insane. The numbers are so big. Let's not talk about anything that it'll actually do, because that gets us into trouble. Because then we have to start talking about why we don't care about clean air and clean water and child care
and children. Care. Yes, right.
Because that's all ladies stuff. That's all.
Well, let me dovetail into Politico.
Yeah.
Because they had a whole article about how moderates, quoting lots of moderates in the Congress, who are mad that Biden isn't tanking his own agenda. Why isn't Biden coming and whipping these votes for the roads and bridges bill?
Right.
Why doesn't he care more about the man bill than he does about the lady bill?
Right.
Because that's what he should be doing. We've elected a white man for that reason. And applause again for Pramila Jayapal. And also this week, Katie Porter came out.
Yeah.
And they have been so on message saying, this is the president's agenda. We're Democrats. We're goddamn Democrats. We're going to support the Democratic president in what he wants to do. And bringing up that gender issue, that these are women's issues. This second bill that we can't get through without this hoop of reconciliation. We should just be able to pass it with reasonable Republicans, so to speak. There are women, I do think that there's a couple of women Republicans who would vote for this if it wasn't for Mitch McConnell and the filibuster. I really do.
Yeah. Well, I think Susan Collins, is a balloon that will blow any way the wind carries her.
Yeah. So they were exactly on target, on message. And it is interesting to me how the mainstream media assumes Republicans will support their president, assumes Republicans will be loyal to Mitch McConnell every time, literally no matter what. But they always expect Democrats to fold.
Right. And that the entire premise that, Republicans are insane and want to kill everyone and destroy the country is just so baked in. Nobody even mentions it.
No.
They're loyal to their leader. Well, what does their leader want? Well, the leader wants to overthrow the government and throw people out of the polling place and overturn elections and fuck us all up and cut taxes for rich people and screw everyone else. Basically
enable police to shoot unarmed black people.
That's their agenda. There's no doubt about that's their agenda. And isn't that horrifying? Well, that's not our job. Is not to morally.
We don't judge. We're here to get quotes from people. Aren't you ready to fight?
it's the horse race, and that's
right.
As I used to write in my blog, it is like there is one font size they use to describe anything.
Mm-hmm.
And Republicans burn down the Capitol is in the same font size as Democrats want to defend the Democratic agenda, as if they're the same thing, as if they're both equally unreasonable, equally crazy. And honestly, as a person who listens to lots of our allies' podcasts, our Never Trump podcasts, there's one thing they're really pissed about. They're really put out about is that Democrats are trying to get past a Democratic agenda.
Yeah, it's short-circuiting them. It really is.
And I don't mean one. I mean every fucking Bulwark podcast, no matter who the guest is, there's always a section now about how berserk and unreasonable and destructive Democrats are. The progressive Democrats who are trying to tank this good man Joe Biden's presidency and doom democracy forever.
You can always tell when a person who is, for all intents and purposes, liberal on Twitter, but has been listening to too much Bulwark.
Yeah.
Because they're news junkies. And so they listen to that. They want caving. Why can't we have our infrastructure bill? We should get scraps off the table at least. Come on. Come on, Democrats, grow up and just compromise.
For God's sake.
We've already compromised.
This was a $6 trillion bill.
This was a $6 trillion bill.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to the
Sanders wanted a $6 trillion bill.
Right. We've cut it in half.
But this is what the game is with Republicans every time.
Right.
You give them half, and then the field is 50 yards instead of 100. So now you got to cut it to 25.
Well, and there's a book that I've mentioned once or twice on this podcast called Half Magic, which I enjoyed when I was like 7 years old. And it was a magic talisman that gives you the ability to get half of whatever you want to wish for. So you just wish for twice of whatever you want. And every time Democrats give half, there's another half demand and another half demand and another half demand. Always by some asshole named Joe, usually. It's Lieberman or Manchin or somebody, but always some dick named Joe who will stab us in the back. And there are certain you really need to understand the people who have been telling you that, these Never Trump guys, these moderates, these people, these former Republicans, we got to get together, man. Democracy is important. Broadly speaking, I agree. I will take all the allies I can get. But now that we've given them a fucking megaphone, a megaphone that we never gave to the left, now that there's an actual fight on the table over legislative priorities, what they have to say about it is, number one, this is typical liberal big government idiocy, and average Americans are going to hate it. It's an insane amount of money. Don't even talk about what's in it. It's an insane amount of money that average Americans are going to hate. No one even knows what's in it. No one knows what's in this bill. No one can tell you what's in this bill. It's just
Katie
a bunch
Porter
of money.
Can tell you what's in this bill. Ask Katie Porter.
La 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 la.
Yeah,
no, Sarah Longwell tells me that no one knows what's in this bill, and Americans are going to hate it. Liberals should just sit down and shut up until next time. Well, that's what you've been telling us for 40 years.
Yep.
Moderates and never Trumpers are the ones who got Biden elected. So liberals need to shut up and sit down. The stupid liberals are going to sink the Biden administration and destroy democracy. And there's all interwoven in there a bunch of bullshit about what average Americans want. And typical Americans, as if we're not typical or average Americans. We're just a bunch of spoilers.
One of the former Hillary advisors was on CNN. And she pointed to that and said, there isn't a person in a diner in Peoria that doesn't love the elements of this bill.
Right. And that's where you can really watch friction if they ever were to put these two groups together. But never Trumpers, very much like Matthew Dowd, are cowards. They will not sit down across from Katie Porter. And so they say, no one likes this. No one likes this bill at all. It polls very poorly among average Americans. And watch Katie Porter just eat them alive.
Yeah.
Because these people are still Republicans. They still believe all the horrible, stupid shit Republicans believe. Which brings us, if you don't mind,
we're going to indulge Driftglass now and do a crossover episode.
I am.
Right?
I'm going to do a mini crossover episode between Science Fiction University and the Cornfield Resistance, between the professional left and that.
And trust us, it's political.
It's political. Yeah. But we have a separate podcast, which you should all know about, called Science Fiction University, where we talk about science fiction and themes and stories and all kinds of cool stuff.
We have 8 whole episodes out.
You should go. And we're working on number 9. So if they pass the reconciliation bill and they pass I swear to you, if they pass the Build Back Better bill, in that bill is funding for the 9th episode.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. No, the funding for all this stuff comes from you guys. So eternal thanks to you. But I thought it was time for a special mini crossover episode to talk about this. First of all, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to spoil the Christopher Nolan 2010 film Inception. And I'm going to spoil Sidney Lumet's 1964 Cold War classic, Failsafe, by talking about the power of deeply embedded, terrible, terrible ideas. So there's a quote from the movie Inception. I'm going to read it verbatim, which is, what's the most resilient parasite? Bacteria, a virus, an intestinal worm? No, it's an idea. Resilient, highly contagious. Once an idea has taken hold of the brain, it's almost impossible to eradicate. But see, the conceit of Inception is that embedding a complex idea doesn't work because your subconscious will fight it and fight it and fight it. So you have to keep it very, very simple. You have to strip it down to its essential elements. Then it'll work, maybe. So what is the very simple idea conservatives have spent decades deeply implanting into their voters' mind? And the idea is liberals are evil. Everything else about the Republican Party, everything else about the conservative movement, everything about the terrible things they believe and the terrible things they are willing to believe stems from the fact that liberals are evil. Now, the second movie is Failsafe. And what I'm stealing from that is that once an idea has been sufficiently reinforced over and over again, telling someone to ignore it will always fail. So in Failsafe, after the U.S. has accidentally launched a nuclear bomb or attack against the Soviet Union, at a certain point, even President Henry Fonda can't stop it. And there's a quote from there, from the pilot in the movie, who's named Grady, who is Henry Fonda has finally gotten through to him. Grady's wife is sitting right there, and Fonda is saying, Grady, this is the President of the United States. I'm ordering you to stop. There's no war here. You've got to stop what you're doing. And Grady says, what you're telling me, I've been specifically ordered not to do. Grady was trained his entire career that once you reach a certain point, any messages from home are lies by the enemy trying to get you not to do your job. And your job is to drop that bomb. And by God, you're going to do it. What conservatives have succeeded in doing by implanting the idea that liberals are evil deep in the minds of their voters and deep in the minds of their media, and frankly, deep in the minds of a whole bunch of people in the mainstream media, is to create a doomsday machine with no off switch. Because once it turned out the liberals were actually right about the right all along, and the Never Trumpers freaked out and started talking about, oh shit, this really is bad. Maybe we should do something about it. All those Never Trumpers were switched off. Nobody listened to anymore on the right because if liberals are evil and you're telling me something I don't want to hear or believe, then you must be a liberal. Therefore, you are evil. Therefore, I don't have to listen to you. So no matter what you tell them, no matter what Bill Kristol or Charlie Sykes tells their former fans will not listen to them because obviously they're liberal. Because if you tell me something I don't want to hear, you're liberal and liberals are evil. So the problem with our Never Trumper friends is they're trapped in the middle. They're trying to turn off the doomsday machine that they themselves built, and they should fucking well know it's impossible because they built it in a way that it can't be turned off.
Mm-hmm.
But by the same token, they still hate liberals. They haven't gotten rid of that idea. So whenever the progressives try to say, look, maybe you should dump the whole idea of conservatism and republicanism as a bad idea completely and start talking about clean air and clean water and college and all the stuff that we want to do. Like, no. That's just as bad. That's just as tyrannical. That's just as awful and ridiculous. I want to live in a world where I can hate the party that I created. Mm-hmm. That has gotten so insane that they threw me out. And now I have to crash on your sofa because I don't have a party anymore. But I hate you too. So I want to tell you, as I'm laying on your sofa, how to run your household.
And my fancy refrigerator and all of my wealth and my kids going to the college of my choice, etc., depends upon me having a microphone to tell you that you're wrong.
Yep. And I have a right to that microphone because I'm special. Because I both understand finally and at last the Republican Party is in fact insane, but I also understand liberals are still evil. So and
I think there's something more psychological going on there. First of all, I really like your essay there.
Well, I want to add one more thing to it. That the reason Never Trumpers are this unfixably schizophrenic is that hating the left is like Dune, third science fiction reference, imperial conditioning. It's unbreakable.
Yeah,
it can't be changed or broken. They're going to go to their graves thinking progressives like you and me are nuts and destructive and dangerous and evil. So, I
think this started with Newt Gingrich thinking that this would be a shtick that would help Republicans win elections in a midterm.
Sure, and it was.
And it was. It was, a noun, a verb, blame Democrats. Whatever is in the headlines, anything bad that happens, you go on TV and you blame Democrats. And that villainized us. Mm-hmm. And then you have Fox News saying, and you can't listen to anybody but Fox News because we're the only ones that will tell you the truth. And then you add to that layer cake the feeling of existential dread that I think this generation of white Americans in particular feels of not being relevant anymore to the coastal elites, so to speak, facing their own mortality, which the boomer generation is never going to die. They're never going to be subject to anything other than eternal youth.
They're always going to be Mick Jagger at a bar having a beer.
Right. Having a beer like they were last night, like he did last night.
Forever.
Well, Mick Jagger has something going on. He can dance and drink, and he is living the life that generation wants to live. Mm-hmm. But a lot of Americans aren't living that Mick Jagger life.
No,
most Americans are not living Mick Jagger's life. So, in addition to, and then there are just some problems like COVID and climate change that are bigger than any one person can really handle. Emotionally, you have to brace yourself for the fact that we're destroying the planet, and there's a pandemic that is killing hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people around the world. And those are very terrifying things. So the place of safety is the place that says, well, the left is the ones that are making you suffer.
Sure.
With masks and vaccines.
And whatever the left does, whatever Barack Obama did was the worst thing anyone ever did.
Yeah.
And whatever he wanted to do, all he wanted to do was give a lot of Americans who didn't have healthcare. And it became, well, of course, he's a Kenyan communist, and those are death panels. He wants to kill your white grandma.
Right.
And I don't think
now they're trying to replay that playbook with Biden.
Sure.
And because of race, it's not working to the extent that they want it to. But they're trying to use the mask and vaccines and critical race theory to make it work. And there's, again, like the Tea Party, there's lots of money behind the school board
absolutely
going on.
And the middle layer, you mentioned Gingrich and Fox News, and that's quite true. I mean, it goes back to at least Agnew.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But the thing that really turned it nuclear was Rush Limbaugh.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just read Rush Limbaugh's celebratory New York Times column from 1994, when the Republican Party was very explicit that it was talk radio that won us the House.
Yep.
Rush Limbaugh is to credit. It's to his credit. That's the margin of victory. Those people are why we win. And Rush Limbaugh's advice was: liberals are evil. The press is out to get you. Never compromise with these people. They're monsters. And that is really just repeating the same message that Republicans have been telling themselves for years before that. That's why Rush Limbaugh worked, because it was always communists are evil. And then one day the Communist Party went away. So we need a new enemy. Oh, it's the left, who are basically communists anyway, which if you listen to Marco Rubio, yeah, we're all a bunch of Marxists, because that button, that latent lever is still embedded in the Republican brain.
It's not, it's meaningless jabber, but it's code words in that brain that flick a switch. Yeah.
It's an incepted idea that's deep in their brain that they cannot get rid of. And it's not just the crazy Republicans. It's the people that run the Republican Party. It's your never-Trumper allies who believe this shit. And it's a substantial portion of the mainstream press who may or may not believe it, but know that their readers and listeners believe it. So the best they can do is say, well, both sides are pretty bad. However bad the Republicans are, the left is pretty much the same. And that's why we're here, because this one incredibly destructive, evil idea was used by people in politics and in the media to turn ordinary Americans, to turn people on the right into people who define themselves by hating you and me. And it doesn't matter what we say or do, because they'll find a caricature to hate. And they'll say, that's you. That cartoon we just drew of you, that's really you. And there's no stopping it. There's no breaking them of this conditioning. And I don't think the Republican Party is salvageable. But I don't think we have to give a microphone to people who hate us and are there simply to say, the left is full of shit. So what we need to do is basically take the Republican Party agenda from 2016 or 15 or 14 and inject it into the Democratic Party. That's what we should do. We should have fiscal responsibility. We can't spend a lot of money.
We should all be Romney 2012. That'll be good, because my taxes will stay low. Yeah.
Romney 2012 is what the Democratic Party should be.
No, well, that's the last actual Republican platform.
Right.
Original platform. Because Donald Trump didn't want to talk at all about the platform except the Ukraine plank in 2016.
Well, and honestly, we tried with passing Romney Care, and that wasn't good enough, because
there was death paneled.
Because there was still a black Democrat who was trying to do it, and that makes it wrong. So
evil.
No matter what we try to do, it's going to be wrong, because remember, liberals are evil. So whatever we say must be wrong. Whatever we say must be lies. Whatever we say must be advancing our terrifying agenda. And every time you tell me something I don't want to believe, you must be part of that conspiracy. So I don't have to listen to you anymore. Bye-bye.
Gus, we got to stop now and do a news roundup. I don't know. I don't think this is in our notes, but did you know that today on Twitter they announced that that hack into the Proud Boys found listed some active New York City Police Department members as members of the Proud Boys?
Shocked, honey. Shocked.
No, you're not.
In part of my very extended family, I'm aware of law enforcement persons who live far, far, far away from here, who are anti-mask, anti-vax, and every caricature you can think of. So no, I'm not at all surprised to learn that there are people who join the police force so they can beat up people they don't like.
Yeah.
They join. I'm not saying all cops are that way, but there's enough sadists and racists in their midst. And they know who they are.
Yeah.
They choose not to get rid of them because reasons.
The Bidening continues. The debt ceiling bill, the infrastructure bill, and the Build Back Better bill are all coming to a head this week, or not. As of this podcast, we know what we'd like to see happen and what we think will probably happen. We know that the House passed a standalone bill to lift the debt ceiling, and which the Senate Republicans are expected to reject. We do know that they are keeping the government open. The Senate voted to keep the government open until December. And otherwise, we have no news about that at this recording.
No, there's a bunch of hysterical speculation, none of which is meaningful to anyone. Everyone should, as bad as we think it could be, there's nothing you can do about it. There's nobody you can, if you think your call to your senator will change his or her mind, then make that call. But at this point, it really is out of our control, and I just refuse to get terribly, terribly worried about things I can't control at all. In counties where Trump received at least 70% of the vote, the coronavirus has killed about 47 out of every 100,000 people since the end of June. In counties where Trump got less than 32% of the vote, the number is about 10 out of 100,000.
And that data is from Charles Gaba, and you should follow him on Twitter.
Yep.
The FDA authorized coronavirus booster shots of Pfizer's vaccine for people over 65, as well as those at risk of serious illness due to frequent exposure to the coronavirus at their jobs. Also, people with health conditions that would indicate it. And Driftglass, we found out that you and I are eligible for a booster shot, and we will be getting one later this month. We got our shots in April, so we've got to wait, but we're going to schedule them this week.
We're going to get all kinds of shots. We're going to get all the shots. So,
we're going to get flu shots, and you got to get a shingle shot.
I do. I want all the chips. I want the whole chip set, because it isn't really fun. It isn't really a full
unless you got all
rig.
The chips. Yeah.
It's like baseball cards. I want to collect them all the good ones. I don't know how they fit the vacuum tubes into the polio vaccine when they were administering it in the 50s and 60s. That must have been really hard to put the entire transistor set into a hypodermic needle.
Can I just insert here that there was a listener who asked about our health, and we're doing okay. Yeah. I have a genetic heart condition that I was born with that's doing fine. I had to have my heart ultrasounded over it, but I'm doing fine. I've never smoked, so my heart is okay for now.
I'm trying to get you to start, but you won't listen.
I won't start smoking. No. And you have asthma, Driftglass.
I do.
I don't know if you know that.
I'm very aware of the fact. It's relatively under control. When the coal plants here accidentally release dust clouds, it gets pretty bad. Oh, yeah.
It gets bad.
In the spring and fall, it gets kind of bad. You might be able to hear it in my voice from time to time. But we are both in reasonably good health and hope to remain so.
But both of those conditions make us eligible for a booster shot.
Yeah. And we're getting them.
Yeah, you betcha.
During congressional hearings this week, General Milley turned Tom Cotton into Tom Cotton candy and then ate him alive.
And stuffed him in a locker.
Yeah, just Jesus. That what is it?
That traitor. Let's never forget what a traitor Tom Cotton is to the Constitution, to the office of the presidency of the United States.
Everything about him is awful. And the people who voted for him are the worst people in the world.
And he wants to be president of the United States.
He does.
All it will take is strategic forgettery.
Right. And turning a couple of states into theocratic empires that will just cancel the votes of people they don't agree with.
People they don't like. Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
Biden canceled a trip to Chicago to promote COVID-19 vaccinations in order to try and broker a compromise with two moderate, quote unquote, moderate Democratic senators threatening to sink his entire economic agenda.
I wish him luck. I really do.
And on that note, I want to thank Donna Berryman on Twitter for tweeting this. Why do we quibble about money only when we're talking about bills that benefit women and children? We don't do that when we talk about defense or war or tax cuts for corporations or the rich.
Well, nobody ever made money on the poor or women and children. On the other hand, you make a shitload of money from people who are rich, people who are corporations. This is why my whole idea why tall people should run the country never took off. Because there's no money in that. But if you invent an ideology where rich people are fucking amazing and should run everything, you're going to get a lot of rich people who give you money to promote that. They'll buy you TV stations, they'll buy you radio stations, they'll give you newspapers. Yeah, I'm just saying. Figure it out. The House Select Committee investigating the January 6th Capitol insurrection issued 11 subpoenas to organizers of the pro-Trump rally outside the White House that turned into the riot.
But they didn't get Ginny Thomas yet. We're still waiting.
Yeah, well.
Trump plans to sue to block the release of his White House records to the House committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Trump is expected to cite executive privilege to block both his White House records as well as to prevent Mark Meadows, Dan Scavino, Steve Bannon, and Kash Patel from testifying to the select committee.
Good luck with that.
Good luck with that.
The Biden administration proposed a federal rule that would modify DACA in an effort to, quote, preserve and fortify it against future legal challenges.
A record low percentage of Americans, just 40%, approve of the job the Supreme Court is doing. Go figure.
Mm-hmm.
And then court members came out and said the high bench should be above politics.
Yeah. Sure.
I love you, Driftglass.
I love you
and
too,
I love
darling.
our listeners. We love you guys. I know it's been a rough week, and it's okay to be enraged. It's okay to curse the two senators to your TV or under your breath or however you do it. That's okay. We just want you to know that you get back up tomorrow morning, and the Chop Wood Carry Water is about building coalitions and long-term getting all this done, because we're going to do it.
And HBO ran Sopranos Marathon.
I know.
I watched a little bit of it, and I just keep thinking Tony Soprano has some pretty good ideas.
Well, and it's interesting. There's an article in the New York Times about that, about how young people started watching The Sopranos who were not around, or grown up enough to watch The Sopranos when it first aired. And what they're getting out of it is the decline of American civilization.
Yeah. Well, there's so much in there.
Yeah, that there's so much narcissism in American culture.
Well,
that fancy mattresses are the decline of our social safety net. Yeah.
And Tony Soprano's son's big dream for a hot minute was joining the Army so he could get helicopter training, so he could be Donald Trump's personal helicopter pilot.
That was his dream job.
Yeah.
Right.
And just
right.
and
in Afghanistan, Dad, in Afghanistan.
And the fact that they love Bush, and shipping, putting the country in the trick bag by invading the wrong country. You don't say nothing bad about that. But if your kid wants to go enlist in the Army, like, whoa.
Yeah.
Let's not get crazy here,
Yeah.
Anyway, it's I see the allure. Let's put it that way. I see the allure.
Each week we post to our Facebook page and website an Internet Kitty sent in by you, the listeners. This week's Internet Kitties, plural, Driftglass. It's Pink Floyd.
What?
One of them is named Pink Floyd.
What?
And the other is Prince Albert.
Oh, well.
These handsome boys came into the world on New Year's Day, 2021.
Really?
And they were brought home the first week in July. Not so little anymore. They're 10 pounds each and still growing. Their main diet, in addition to an occasional freshly caught housefly, because they are fast kitties, is, of course, freshly poured cat food, our fake sponsor. Whether you serve pet store perfection or dollar store dreck, your cats will sit on the kitchen floor and demand that the food they eat is only freshly poured. Freshly poured, freshly poured. Oh, my Lord, it's freshly poured. You can visit Pink Floyd and Prince Albert at our Facebook page and website.
Uh-huh.
And you can send your Internet Kitty, dog, or other pet to us at our email address, proleftpodcast@gmail.com. Please put the word kitty, Kitty, in the subject line. And proleftpodcast@gmail.com is where you can also write to both of us. Feel free to write us. We love hearing from you. Be aware that if you write us at any of our addresses, we reserve the right to read your email or U.S. Postal Service. Go, postal unions. Letter on the air unless you say otherwise. #FireDeJoy. Did you know, Driftglass, I got an email from my bank today?
Really?
Telling me not to send any payments by mail because of the delay in first class mail. That they didn't mention DeJoy by name, but the changes at the U.S. Postal Service, delaying first class mail by extra days. And it was a way for them to advertise their online banking.
Well,
I was just astonished.
You know how we always say, look, if you hate Fox News, there's always work at the post office.
Yeah.
At our local post office, there's a big old banner out front going, we're hiring. So guys, you don't have to work at that hellmouth of a place anymore. There are jobs available. Useful public service jobs available right now. You just have to quit working for assholes and monsters and go to work for people who drop the mail at our door.
And get ready to fire Joy, though. He's got to go. Don't forget our gourmet coffee guideline. If you can afford to buy an espresso-based beverage for yourself, buy one for us. This is not charity. This is our job, and it's a labor of love. Approximately 1% of our listeners support this podcast with a contribution. You can, too. See our website, proleftpod.com, for details. Our PayPal, postal address information, merch, all of it. It's all there at proleftpod.com. Even our P.O. Box address is there. So if you didn't catch it at the beginning of every single show we've ever done, you can see it in print at proleftpod.com. Please share our show on social media, and thank you so much for doing that. Hey, Driftglass, how are the internet kitties doing this week?
Well, Blue Gal, honestly, when I learned that the cat this week was Pink Floyd, which I learned about 2 minutes ago, I got so distracted with the alternate Pink Floyd titles that I'm going to just read a few of them that I just came up with like just now. There's Careful with That Mouse, Eugene. There's See Emily Spay. And several species of small, adorable kitties gathering in a cave and grooving with a Pict. Now, there are thousands more in my mind, but at the moment, those are the three that popped into my head before saying the Internet Kitties want to point out that it's National Podcast Day to remind you that every day should be National Voter Registration Day.
Thank you, Driftglass.
You're welcome, Blue Gal. I love you.
I love you too. Bye.
Bye.
Let's think about living. Let's think about loving. Let's think about the hooping and the hopping and the bopping and the loving, lovey-dovey. Let's forget about the wine and the crying, the shooting and the dying, and the fellow with a switchblade knife. Let's think about living. Let's think about life.
The Professional Left Podcast is recorded under a Creative Commons license. Copyright 2021 DGBG Productions.